Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16, 2020. The Economic Development Committee will use remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded, will be posted at the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the governor's emergency action requirement of keeping public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting, please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. And at this time, I'll take a roll call, and I'm just going to go off the our letterhead. Peter Barbieri here. David is not, I don't believe. Lisa?
Here.
Matt?
Here.
Glenn?
Here.
And Christina.
Here.
Oh, Christine, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right, so I think one of the items we have probably just to go through first and try to get things over so we can keep within our hour time frame is the discussion of Hopping Brook Park. If you recall, a couple months ago, they came to us as they were in the process of permitting for the project out there. That discussion got continued. We got an email for them to come back, and we have an open item from the viewpoint of permit approvals and tenant issues and associated with parks. So they are back on the agenda. The agenda was posted with the town clerk. The agenda was posted on the town's website dealing with Hopping Brook Park. So again, as we've talked about, we typically look as part of our mission, looking at significant projects that have an economic impact to the town. And that's what our focus is. Our focus is not issues that the planning board or the zoning board or the conservation deal with in the nature of site plan review and operations of the site. But I think we're looking at the economics of the site and just have, to some extent, a general understanding of the project. So with that background, Michael Milanowski, I think, hopefully I pronounced that right, sent some information, which was the select board, the information they presented to the select board, including an assessment info, as well as we had gotten a letter from them on the history of the project, an update for our own information, as much as you want to read it, traffic information. So that's where we're at. So Michael, if you are there, the floor is yours to just give us a very brief, because again, we're not dealing with the operations of the site, but very brief, and we want you to focus on the economic impact from the site. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to speak tonight and kind of bring you up to date from our last meeting we had a couple months ago on the progress of the project. For background, as Peter said, we sent a few documents out. Hopefully people have had a chance to review those that provide a summary to the project and how this project has been in the works for decades. And being in the works for decades, it's had its ebbs and flows based upon the market demand and needs. And where we're at right now is we have gone through and met with the planning board, who have unanimously approved a site plan review. We've met with the ZBA, who unanimously gave us a height variance. We've met with the Conservation Commission that also unanimously approved our project. And then finally with the Board of Health that we've also received unanimous approval for that. Our last step, and the one final step that we have, is to go to the planning board, and we're on their agenda in January for the final permit, which is a special permit for this facility. The facility is to build an 805,000 square foot facility. And the investment for that, all in, including the land acquisition, the permitting design, the engineering, the site development, the infrastructure tied into that, and then the vertical construction of the building, is around the tune of $100 million. And again, it's a large building. It's an 800,000 square foot building. Although the final estimate is still a ways away, and that's up to the Board of Assessors to do, Preliminary discussions are that the annual tax bill from that facility could be near $1 million on an annualized basis. And again, that's based upon, the amount of investment, the infrastructure, the structure that's going to be built, provided that the planning board does approve the final permit for this project. So that's one major benefit to the town that ties into the economic development. And this has been part of the master plan and has always been zoned in industrial development from the get-go. Just to talk one more step about permitting is the project is actually permitted for the use that's going in right now and has MEPA approval for the use that's going in right now of the 805,000 square feet. We do intend to submit a second project at a smaller size that would put the development up to at another probably 400,000 to 500,000 square feet with a second building that would have pretty much, half of the economic tax impact that this one would have. And that would hopefully go to the planning board later this summer for construction in 2023. I'm sorry, 2022. With the approval of the planning board, we would start construction this spring. So that would be going on your tax rolls in FY22. Now, part of that is also that the developer has reduced down the intensity of the development since John Deli Pascoli bought the property 20 plus years ago after he had done all of the housing development in Medway, the Claybrook development. And, the zoning in Holliston was different and it was for industrial. So it's taken a while for that to happen. So the second benefit is going to be a new traffic signal that the developer is going to pay for. We have ran that by Mass DEP. And again, as Peter said, there's a whole transportation analysis that has to go into that. And that has been reviewed and approved by Mass DOT to move forward with that new traffic signal. That traffic signal is going to have the benefit of reducing the speed on Route 16 going through there. And it's also going to create different pauses that don't necessarily exist right now for traffic to leave some side roads that are there. The developer is also committed to not using South Street for any of their truck traffic coming in and out of the site. No other developer in the existing industrial park has agreed to do that or has committed to do that. So again, the CRG Integrated Solutions that's moving forward with this believes that's the right thing to do. And they will be using state numbered roads to move their trucks out until they get to 495. So there'll be a limited amount of road use in Holliston, basically from the Hopkins Brook Industrial Park straight through until you get to the Milford line and then onto 495. So that's another economic benefit that's going to improve, we think, the ability of the town to do some more development in the future to pay for the services that you need for public safety, schools, and education. From the standpoint of a job generation standpoint, is this project is designed and will have north of 300 employees. And that could be up to 400 employees, but it's somewhere between 300 and 400 employees. Those employees would be working in 3 shifts. The main shift would be, a 9 to 5 or probably an 8 to 4 type shift. And that would probably have more than half, or let's call it half, of the employees would be on that first shift. The next 2 shifts would have on average about 25% of that total employment component. And, that's going to depend a little bit. It could be a 30-20 split or a 20-25 split for the second and third shift. But the intensity is much lower in the evenings as they're kind of doing their internal prep and the redistribution of products from one pallet to another and making these different delivery packets that can be delivered to other major stores and distribution facilities that will be taking place in there. So that employment, with the way the project is moving along right now, we hope to have this open by the end of 2021, and with them having the ability of hiring employees at that time. So again, from a job generation, you're looking at 3, possibly 400 employees. From a tax revenue, you could be looking at close to $1 million annually coming in. And then there are these additional traffic investments that are going to be made in the community, as well as making sure that other items that have been raised as concerns are properly mitigated.
So that's kind of the economic thing. Has any consideration been, particularly from the viewpoint of employees, any type of connection to the local rail trail and any donation to that? Or is that not
Absolutely.
been
Yes,
discussed?
there has. What there has been is, as part of the planning board process, the developer agreed to certain improvements on the rail trail, that those would be either on South Street or on Hopkins Brook, to put in new flashing signals, to potentially put in raised speed bumps. Basically, the developer has committed to infrastructure investments to benefit the rail trail and to make it safer for people to pass back and forth, and where possible to make it more of a hindrance for people using South Street for trucks to go over that. You know, again, we're committing to not taking our tractor trailers over that, but there still are existing tractor trailers going over that area. And, you know, if the town allows, you know, we'll pay for the speed humps to further hopefully try to mitigate the desire for people to not use the numbered roadways.
All right, so that's the extent of economic benefit, so all those items. Okay, we'll go to the committee first. Committee members, questions?
I had a
Matt?
couple of questions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Matt Coletti, Summit Point Drive. Good evening. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I think I had 3 questions that I noted in the course of your speaking. One of them related to the source of the assessment, that of the $100 million, in that it being an estimated assessment, but any assumptions, or who was the source of the assessment, and what assumptions, if any, went into creating that assessment?
So about 9 months ago, I had met with the town's assessor and went over what, you know, we were anticipating with this project. And I know she's put a lot of effort into looking at other sites around the state. I can't speak for her, but what I can say, Matt, is we've had those discussions and they've looked at that. There hasn't been an official number released, because part of that, Matt, is they have to actually have the final building plans for them to assess and go from there. But, you know, from a ballpark number, we're looking at about $1.20 a square foot.
And this is Pete Barberry. Is it going to be sold to the entity, or is it going to be leased?
So we, as the landowner, John Deli Priscoli, is actually going to be selling the property to CRG Integrated Real Estate Solutions. They will end up owning the property, so it'll be their property.
Yeah.
And they generally, I believe the number is about 70% that they retain and own. There are some times where a Fortune 500 company does choose to own their buildings, but most Fortune 500 companies prefer to lease from others on long-term leases.
Okay, thank you. Matt, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I think 2 more questions. The second proposed building, would the use of the second proposed building be consistent with the uses presented to all of the boards you've already presented to? Would the use of the second building be consistent with the use of the first building?
Yes, it would. It'd be identical use. It would still be warehousing. It would fall under the ITE code 150, which defines how much traffic would be going in and out of the site. That is actually in the plan set that Peter sent around on the last page, or maybe it's page 4 from the end of that, shows a conceptual layout of that additional building, you know, kind of parallel with the 805,000 square foot building. That one's kind of more centrally located in the site at the end of the cul-de-sac that we're building. And actually, that just reminded me, Peter, you talked about economic benefit. Another thing that hasn't really been addressed, but we as the developer paying for it, is we're actually creating a loop water system in the town. Where right now, Hopkin Brook is a dead end where the water comes to, and we're correcting it to the, I believe, the poultry project, where the residential piece is in there. So that's going to create an improvement in water circulation for the town at a cost to us. But to your question, Matt, it is the same use at the ITE code 150 warehousing. And I'm sorry, one other just component on that. That one, because we are changing that away from office, is that we are doing a notice of project change with MIPA for that additional 500,000 square feet to change the use. It's going to have a lower impact from a traffic and a water needs and a sewer needs, but we still have to go to MIPA and submit a revised notice of project change because we're changing the use from what it originally was for that additional 500,000 square feet.
And third question relates to the 300 employees on site and the 3 shifts. Are the shifts kind of standard, 9 to 5 shifts? Would the traffic patterns revolve across the 3 shifts, kind of consistent with extended working hours of that would mirror peak times, or are these kind of transient hours? Are they coming and going? What do these shifts look like?
Yes. So my understanding and how it's been shared with me is these are standard 8-hour shifts, but they may not be in the 9 to 5, which is your kind of office banking hours. They would probably move up an hour or two and be, a 7 to 3 or an 8 to 4, and then, rotate 8 hours after that. So they're kind of a slightly off peak when you compared to, your standard office commuting hours, by an hour or two.
All right, thank you. And last question, you noted in the course of your discussion here, approvals so far by the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, ZBA, Board of Health. My question is, in all of those kind of prior presentations, proceedings, open hearings, were there any other businesses in the park there or in town that appeared and voiced any kind of opinion in support or in opposition of the project?
My recollection is that the business community has been relatively silent. I don't recall a pro or a con coming from the business community in Holliston.
Okay.
That's fair. Thank you.
Other board members? Nobody? All right, we'll open up to the public. So we've got a number of people on here, so we'll have to see who's kind of asking to go. Of course, you can help me on this, right? So anybody in the public wishes to speak, now's the time to chime in or raise your hand, I guess is the way it happens.
Yeah, Peter, do you want me to manage the hand raisers and call on people as they raise their hand?
What's that?
Would you like me to call out people as they raise their hand?
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like Jeff has the first question.
Hi, I'm actually not Jeff. I'm Jeff's wife. My name's Whitney Grand Mason. And I guess my question is, you mentioned that you estimate about $1 million in taxes being generated from this project, but I guess I'm curious what the net would be, because I live in Medway, but I own property in Holliston, and my taxes will negatively be impacted. So my guess is that you will have other Holliston taxpayers who will then end up paying less. So I'm guessing there's a net, and I'm curious what that would be.
The net will be close to $1 million is what it's anticipated to be. We are not aware, and nor do we ever seen any verified evidence that because there's economic development in the state of Massachusetts, whether it's in Holliston, Medway, Worcester County, or in Boston or in Cambridge, that it's going to have a negative impact on other people's real estate development. We don't have any evidence of that. And I just don't see that happening. The state requires, and for everyone to live, people need jobs. And you know, our economy is changing, that people are more of a consumer society. And this is a need that we have out there. But I am not aware of any documentation that's going to lower the revenue coming into the town of Holliston or in any other town in a similar situation.
Even by direct abutters?
Even by direct abutters.
Interesting. Okay.
Is that your question? So you're all set?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I agree with the answer, but question answered.
I happen to be on the Board of Assessors as well in Holliston. I will tell you how we do what we have to do, which is and you know, this year we revalued again and property values went up. There's two aspects of kind of your final tax bill. One is that valuation. We base that valuation on the value or the sales prices of homes from 2019. So they went up as compared to what we had for values for last year. I have been on the Board of Assessors since, I don't know, 1996. I will tell you that I have not seen any reduction in values of residential properties in proximity to any of the industrial parks as a result of development within the industrial parks. I'm an attorney in Framingham, appear in front of boards all the time and assessors and everything else. And it would be hard to believe that values would drop as a result of development of industrial park that's been in an industrial park for a period of time. If this was a situation where the town rezoned it and created that might have an impact, but this has been zoned industrial for decades. So I don't know if that helps to answer anything. Okay, next person.
Yep, Matthew. Oh, you're on. Yep, there you go.
Yeah. Hi, thank you. Matthew Minch, 4 Old Surrey Lane. I couldn't disagree more with what Mr. Barbieri just said. There are a multitude of residents in Midway, the abutters, who have sold or are trying to sell their properties because of this project, because of the negative impact it's going to have on their health, their well-being, and their property values. And we see it already. There is no question that property values are already dropping. So folks that had significant value have already lost 40, I want to say to 50, $60,000 in their property value. So you're kidding yourself. You really are. This is not a harmonious project in any way, shape, or form. The traffic implications, the pollution implications, the property value reduction, the potential impact to water. This is not, I don't think, so I've been on these calls for a little while now. I think you might know my name. And there's not been a single person on these calls, a single Holliston resident, a single Holliston resident, a single Milford resident that is in favor of this project, because it will not have any benefit. So nobody's going to get their taxes reduced. There's not going to be any tax reduction. So you might generate money for the town of Holliston to do what? I don't know. Maybe do some infrastructure work or whatsoever, but there is no positive benefit whatsoever to anybody that's on this call. And I implore you to get somebody to say something positive other than the developer. I rest my case. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Anne Marie.
Hi, I'm Anne Marie, Dorning 9 Timberledge Drive. So I have a couple of questions. So we've talked about shifts, but there's not a lot of detail. Is one of those shifts overnight?
Yes, this would be a 24-hour operation. It would be 3 shifts. And again, they would be staggered every 8 hours.
Okay, so cars will be coming in and out overnight.
And that's in the traffic analysis, yes.
You mentioned in your presentation that you are asking trucks, you will ask trucks not to use South Street. Is that accurate?
No, I did not say that. I said we will require trucks not to use South Street. We're not asking them to.
Okay.
The developer will require that the trucks that are servicing the facility not use South Street.
And how will they enforce that?
They will enforce that because that'll be part of the conditions that we have already agreed to with the planning board. So it's
Okay, so guess what? We have.
Again, Anne Marie,
Excuse me, but we have, I can't even tell you how many, we have the Lowland Industrial Park. There's not one person that really abides by the rules that are enforced about not using certain streets. And there's no enforcement possibility. So, I mean, I guess I'm a little skeptical that that will actually happen.
Right.
I'm not aware there's any.
Mike, again, you made your point. That's not an issue that we're getting into on the economics. I mean, that's a question from the viewpoint of assuming the town approves the project with conditions, the enforcement provisions, and if there's a violation of a condition of approval, that violates the permit and the town has recourse in that fashion. It is, what all we can answer that question on. But I agree with you. There will be people who don't exactly follow what they're supposed to do in the nature of the route.
Right. And so I guess I would just wrap up by saying the economics that you're talking about are both benefits and costs to the surrounding neighborhood, to the town of Holliston itself. So I hope that you factor that in.
Okay, thank you.
There was a question that came in on the chat before the next hand. So that would be, would the 300 to 400 employees be utilizing South Street at all in the hour? So I believe that's what we were just talking about, but Mike, I'll give you that question again.
Sure. The position that we've had is on truck traffic. Truck traffic was the concern that was addressed by the planning board. Again, I'm not aware there's any restriction on any business right now that aren't using it. We have agreed and volunteered and asked the planning board to put that in the writing so that truck traffic that's coming to and from this site would not use South Street. We will have employees that will probably live on South Street that will be using their passenger cars coming in there, but the tractor trailers will not be using South Street based upon the conditions that we've agreed to.
Okay, next.
Great, Gary.
Hi, Gary Rotatori, 14 Old Surrey Lane. There was a question that was asked earlier. Did anybody from the current industrial park have any comments, pro or con, about this proposal? And at one of the last, I don't think it was a planning board meeting, I think it was Andy Rodenheiser from Rodenheiser Plumbing, has a business there. He very much objected to this project. He said that the truck traffic and the parking within the industrial site is already unbearable. So I just wanted to make sure that that question was answered, and I think that meeting was recorded, so you can probably go back to that. So you have people within the industrial park that are opposed to this particular project. And I guess the last thing I'll say, just to echo, the trucks turning left out of the industrial site, unless the truck drivers work for the company, and the company that's going to own the site or rent the site or lease the site has not even been named. It's supposedly unknown. So most warehouses like this are serviced by third-party trucking companies. All they do is deliver, like my company would contract with them to deliver product to a place like this. They're not under no obligation or contract with the warehouse itself. So unless, again, this is a warehouse where the company owns every single truck that's going in and out, which is highly unlikely, it's very unrealistic for anybody to say that we can control whether a trucker goes left or right. And when the traffic is stalled on 495, I think a lot of the trucks will be going right through downtown Holliston. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, just a comment on that is that, again, it's a condition that's been agreed to by the planning board. It's a condition the developer has to live up to. It's a condition the planning board is required and or the town to enforce. So Gary, you're using your personal information, but again, this is a very sophisticated project that's going in, and it will meet those. The one thing I will bring up is you mentioned a current business in the park that's probably the biggest culprit of running their trucks through South Street, that the name of the company is on the side of the trucks. And again, we're agreeing not to do that. We would hope that other companies within the industrial park would follow the lead that we're doing and not put trucks on South Street and residential roads.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Okay, a question came in. Can the town restrict operations to daytime hours?
The application that we've applied for is that the facility would be open 24 hours like all other warehouses in the town. Again, our position is that in order for a facility like this, in order for the benefits to come to the town for the taxes and so forth, that it has to run 24 hours. Again, it'll be smaller shifts in the evenings and so forth. And there's noise studies that has to be done as part of the planning board process, and appropriate mitigation needs to be done. So our anticipation is that people won't notice that it's there once the mitigation's in. And again, the traffic study delineates what the hours when the trucks will be moving in and out and at what capacity.
Thank you.
Okay, Robin.
So I guess I'm hearing a lot of everything that's going on, and I guess I just sort of wanted to be able to say that I feel like in some respects, some of us on the abutters, I live on South Street, are collateral damage to what is taking place through Hopping Brook Park. I appreciate that you've addressed the truck traffic, but I think the impact of 300 to 400 additional employees cutting through off of Clark and South is going to impact our property value as much as some people don't believe it will. It changes the whole dynamics of this road, and it becomes a less desirable. And I'm paying significant amount of taxes, and feeling like I just need to make sure that somebody understands that we've been here, some of us, for a long, long time, and we would appreciate sort of taking into consideration the impact that that's going to have on the traffic on the Clark and South Street Road.
Let me just say one thing, that there's a kind of a good and a bad of this type of business. This type of business, from the town's perspective and employment perspective, the bad aspect of that is that there's not as many employees in an operation like this as there would be in an office, in which they already have NEPA approved. You get a lot more employees from an office type of use than this type of use. The other thing is you certainly get more truck traffic from this type of use, but they're addressing how they're going to handle that. So, if this doesn't go and they came back with more of an office use or an employee generated use, to be honest with you, those employee numbers would go up, beyond the 300 to 400 that they're saying. It probably would be more in peak hour than off-peak hour than what they're doing. So to some extent, it's a guess as far as, is it beneficial to have this or that? And that's a decision the planning board's got to make. And that's up to them as far as whether the use is appropriate. Right, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Robin, if I could, just to add to that, yes, we are hoping we'll have 300 to 400 employees, but they're all not going to use South Street. They're all going to come from multiple different directions. Some may work in Ashland, some may work in Framingham, some may work in Milford, some may work wherever. They're going to come in multiple directions. Where trucks are restricted, they have to get off of 495. So we know where the trucks are going to go. The workers are going to be differently. I would advocate that, as I said before, I would challenge the other businesses in the Hopkinton Industrial Park to follow our lead and commit to making sure their trucks don't use South Street. That will take significant.
I want to stop you there. I don't want to go into what other businesses are doing and
Sure.
get residents saying, yeah, that's a great idea, because there's nothing the town can do for a business that's already operational in the park.
No, I understand that.
Whatever the traffic is from what's out there, we now have to live with.
All right. And as Peter said,
tell them they got to change their habits.
And as Peter said, the project is approved today for 17,000 trips. That's what the MEPA is allowed to go into that site today. What we're doing is reducing it down so that it's going to be significantly less. And this 800,000 square foot facility is I think the numbers I have are 50. I just want to quote the right number so I'm not mistaken here. It is 1,152 average vehicle trips per day. So the developer, instead of having those high intensity uses, has reduced down the scope, and that's why we're going in this direction. So there's, on one hand, there's less workers, but that's also a benefit because there's less people traveling the side streets.
All right, next.
All right, David Bestial.
People have made a lot of comments. I'll make it quick. At the top of his update, Mr. Malinowski mentioned that he and his people have secured the height variance of 60 feet. As of the planning board meeting on November 12th, at the top of that meeting, someone on the board stated that the zoning board okay of 60 feet height is under appeal.
Okay, again, the issues of what their process is and permits they've got, that's not what we're reviewing. We're reviewing whether there is economic benefit from this project. Did you have anything on that?
Nope.
Okay.
There was a question in the chat. What is the expected police, fire, ambulance costs expected with the addition of 400 employees and the unknown number of truckers daily?
So I have a background in economic development. I served on the Massachusetts Economic Development Council, and the reason why towns put in their master plan to have industrial and commercial development is because your cost of services for supplying those entities is significantly less. And what I mean by that is that there's no children to educate that are moving into the Holliston Industrial Park. There's no one that's going to be going to the library to get library books. There's no one that's going to be using the parks and the recreation and the Board of Health items that are in there. And generally is that when it comes to inspections for the fire department, is that they have to go in and do, annual and quarterly inspections on those. Those are a fee for service. So from the town's budget, and when we're looking at economic development, if you define economic development as most other towns do in this state, is creating tax revenue to support your public services, education, public safety. That's why industrial and commercial development is why you focus on that, because it's a net revenue. The town makes profit, so to speak, off of what happens for commercial industrial compared to what happens with residential.
Thank you.
Great. Back to Matthew.
Yes, thanks again for taking me back. I'll make a couple of points. First, as far as traffic goes, and I'm going to get to the economic point because I think that's what you're focused on. But back to the traffic, in stark contrast to Mr. Malinowski's assessment as far as traffic goes, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation estimates upwards of 7,500 tractor trailer trips per day. So getting back to the economic piece for the town.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, that's outdated information.
That's not, that's new.
It's outdated.
Again, there's no given proof of economic impact resulting in increases or decrease resulting from truck traffic. And we've got to, if we're going to do this, we got to rely upon the fact that the planning board, if they approve the project, will include the condition for truck traffic out 16 to Milford.
Yes, sir.
That's the way we've got to approach it. That's what's proposed. So
I would contend, sir, that has a big impact on the economic viability of this project for the town. The impact to, and I think one of the folks earlier had mentioned about the property value impact. So they're talking about, I've heard all kinds of different figures as far as tax revenue, 500 a year. Now I'm hearing $1 million a year. What about the impact to folks' property value? And I would implore anybody that's on this call in the town of Holliston that if this actually goes through and gets approved, which I think would be a disgrace, that they should ask for an assessment to reduce their property values and their associated taxes. And I'll rest there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, was he from Holliston or Medway? I didn't catch the address.
I believe Medway, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Audrea.
Hi, yes, my name's Audrea. I live on Noel Drive, and I just wanted to clarify, I guess the statement
Can we
of
get your last, can we get your last name?
Zabatora.
Okay.
I wanted to
Thank you.
clarify one of the statements, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard something about being some type of tax benefit. It was $1.20 per square foot or something. Is that correct?
Yes, the question was asked by Matt as to the calculations that were done and how we looked at the project for an assessment. As I mentioned, we had extensive conversations with the assessor in town. We've done our own analysis. And what I used was that per square foot, we were looking at about $1.20 a square foot is to what the tax value of that would be, which, you know, gets you close to $1 million for an 805,000 square foot building.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I just wanted to loop that back to the question that somebody else had, one of the other neighbors, about restricting at night hours. And I think that there was a comment that we couldn't do that because that would minimize the tax benefit. But I guess I'm wondering how that works, because it seems like the tax benefit is coming from purely square footage and not necessarily related to the hours of operation. So I guess I'm wondering why that couldn't be a possibility.
Yeah, Mike, you don't have to answer that. Let me answer. Yeah, the valuation, the town's valuation of the property, typically the cost of construction is kind of a ballpark of what it would ultimately be valued at. For all kind of these type of properties, commercial investment properties, it's based upon an income and expense, which was why I asked the question whether this property was going to be sold or leased, because it's difficult to do, you know, a lot easier to do an income and expense calculation if the property is leased, because you get the lease information, you get all that information. Where the property's owner occupied, it's more difficult. What you do is you look at other similar situated properties and what rentals are and income and expenses are for those properties. This is going to be honest with you, a little unique because we don't have, you know, that big of a building in Holliston that we're going to be able to do a direct comparison at. But, you know, again, the ballpark of probably what they're paying for construction is probably within the ballpark of what that value may ultimately come about. They certainly have the right, as does every property owner, if they disagree with the valuation that we propose, to seek an abatement. But we will look at it from the viewpoint of doing comparables, and we will, from the Board of Assessors point of view, ultimately go off-site or out of Holliston as well to try to find similar sized buildings in other communities and do a valuation approach of that. But I don't think they're probably way far off in the nature of the $80 million valuation. And to be honest with you, that is $1.5 million at our $18.75 per thousand. So, you know, I think $1 million a year is probably on the safe side, because I'm sure if we do it at the full 80, I'm sure they may seek an abatement and they'll have to prove why that isn't appropriate, but that's up to them. So conservatively, $1 million's probably a decent number.
And
Okay.
just the other component that Audrey was bringing up, and thanks for clarifying that, because we felt the $1 million is a conservative number. As it relates to the 3-shift operation that was brought up, is that no other business in the town is regulated that you can only open, for an industrial space, you can only work inside the building for a certain number of hours a day. If the government starts to restrict when a business can open and internally, and again, this isn't open to the public, this isn't a retail store, this is an internal operation, then you've made the facility uneconomical, which means that no one will invest $80 million, $100 million, $1 million into a project if the government's not going to let them operate like they do in all other towns and how all other businesses operate in Holliston. So to your point is that if there was hours of restrictions, the projects aren't economical. Nothing gets developed.
Okay, yes, thank you for tying that back for me. I guess my other comment was just regarding the property values, because I think there was a suggestion that this wouldn't have an impact. But I guess I just question, because you think about any single house that's located on a main road and you look at their resale value, I think overall we can all agree that it's typically much less than that same house if it were on, say, a cul-de-sac. And I would assume that that's directly related to the traffic and the quality of life and the noise that's associated with that. So I just think for those who are living in those areas that could see an increase in that traffic, that should be considered and taken into account.
I make the point, I want to congratulate you for understanding that yes, in Holliston, I'm sure other communities do it too, is that you break areas up into neighborhoods. In Holliston, we have neighborhoods that are on major highways because they are potentially impacted by the traffic. And we analyze the sales in those neighborhoods on an annual basis to come up with their values. But we do take into consideration in Holliston properties that are located on major highways. Thank you. Next.
And Peter, if I could just follow that up, it goes with assessing too, our appraisals. When an appraiser comes to a property, if you have a property that's next to a Walden Ponds that's protected, and owned by the nature reserve that can't be developed, well, that's going to have a different valuation than when you buy a house next to active industrial zone property. So, it's not like we're taking value away because it's always been industrial next to some of these, next to the properties in Medway. And the final point I'll make on that, I mentioned it earlier, is we are required in the zoning bylaws to deal with the noise and to make sure that that's all mitigated so it doesn't impact the neighbors, as well as putting up a sound barrier and a light barrier as well that's tied into the plans.
Okay, we're running on time. So again, I want to keep our focus on the economics of it. And if things have already been said, we don't need to have them repeated. So next.
Yep, I had a comment that Rob Wilcox would like to ask a question. Rob.
Yes, could everybody hear me? Yeah,
Yep.
I'm 137 South Street in Holliston. I think just one thing I would like to bring up is I think from an economic perspective, this is about risk. And I think the risk is being taken by the residents in the neighborhood of this project in Holliston. And I think that, the uncertainty, and there's optimistic numbers of property values not being degraded further by this project. But I think that there's a significant risk to the Holliston homeowners in this area. And that's something that the town needs to take into account in an economic perspective. And I think that's one of the major concerns of all the residents. I think the other aspect of risk, and this could be economic, is safety. Having all this traffic can create further accidents. I can know we have older residents in our area, younger residents, and traffic, those going, from South Street onto Route 16, Washington Drive, they are going to be at a higher risk of accidents and others because of this increased truck traffic. So what's the value of a life? Is that $1 million a year if you lose a life? I think if you want to put it in economic things, the traffic, the pollution, you could add all these things up, and is it worth $1 million a year? I think that's a big question for the town to consider from an economic perspective.
Thank you.
All right, there's a question in chat. Is this project going to be packaged into an REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust?
No, as I mentioned before, CRG owns their own properties 70% of the time, or they sell them off to the end user for the Fortune 500 companies that do it. This is not a REIT project that's doing. You're dealing with the developers that are generally long-term owners. And you know, I got to talk about the risk and the fact that somebody brought up that people are going to die because of this project. I'm a little offended by that. You know, we as a property owner have a right to develop our property based upon the zoning that's there, just as the gentleman that mentioned that from 137 South Street had the right to build his residential property. And we have a right to build capacity up to 17,000 vehicle trips today. What we're doing is reducing that scope down to a smaller scope. So it's not that development's not going to happen. It's not that nothing's going to occur there. There is going to be development there. And that's just part of our property rights in Massachusetts that residents have and industrial owners have. And that's what we're trying to do, is do it in a responsible way to generate the tax revenue for the town, follow the town's master plan, and follow the zoning.
All right, thank you. Next.
What is the anticipated ramp up over 1 to 3 years to potentially 5 years to maximize rent and build out and fully realize the tax revenue?
In the first year, we believe that the building will be up and running by the end of the calendar year. And Peter could talk to this more, is that if the building is completed by December 31st, the town will get the full tax revenue for the infrastructure and the value that was put there. And that'll be on the tax rolls in FY 2022.
Let me clarify that a little bit. Okay, the town assesses the value as of January 1, what's there as of January 1, this upcoming. If they increase the value of the building by more than 50%, which they will do because there's no value in the building out there, we get the right to assess the value of the building that's out there as of June 30th. That will be the value that'll be set for next year. If they finish before December 31 of next year, that full valuation will be in 2022. So if they get half the building up by June, we'll have half the building value, let's call it 40 million. The following year would be the full 80 million. All right, next.
Anne McElhinney.
Hi, this is Anne McElhinney, 12 Carriage House Way. Sorry, I joined this meeting a little late. I would like to understand from Mr. Milanowski what the steps are in his understanding as far as working with the planning board. And I know he mentioned about, you know, the economic gains and all of that. But before we even jump to what that would be, I think we want to understand all the steps that you need to take and make sure that we all can, you know, honestly understand that those will be taken in a honest and forthright manner.
Absolutely. We have received multiple permits from the town. There's one permit that's left for the developer to receive, and that's a special permit that has been applied for by the planning board. And we have a meeting on that in the first week of January, and we're hoping to get that permit approved that time.
Okay, next. Christine, is there a list of how many people want to speak at this point?
No, there's just like a trickle of questions coming from chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I want to, if we can close off in the next 2 minutes so the board can decide what it wants to do. If we have new questions, new information, we'll certainly take those.
Yep, this is the last question I have in chat right now.
Okay.
A 60-foot height variance is not approved. Please ask Mr. Milanowski to prove it's been approved beyond the original plan.
Yes, we have gone to the Zoning Board of Appeals and they have approved unanimously a height variance for the property. The residents of Medway have appealed what the town of Holliston board did. So that is in litigation, but the town of Holliston granted the 60-foot easement. The residents in Medway have appealed that.
All right, thank you. So that's it for the questions?
Correct.
All right, so that'll end up our public discussion on it. Any comments, questions from the board members at this point in time? All right, what's the thought of the board as far as what it wants to do? We do not right now have a meeting scheduled before they go back to well, no, we don't. We don't meet until I think the 13th. You're back on the planning board on the 7th, correct?
Yes, sir.
So what's the board's preference? I mean, personally, I think we've received the information. I think we have to leave to our permitting boards the questions as to, what shifts are appropriate in timing and truck routing. But having been in the development field, I think there are conditions that they can oppose should they choose to approve the project to deal with those issues. From the economic aspects, I don't see a detriment on the economics, and to be honest with the values of adjacent properties. I mean, this is industrial zone property. It's been industrial zone property for decades. And it would have to be proven of that. I understand people's concerns, in fear of that, and also the fear of traffic. But I think from the viewpoint of traffic, this use is probably the best use that would be out there in the nature of the volume of traffic. And if they're agreeing to control truck, I think this is the best thing that can happen with the town. Otherwise, nothing goes in there until such time when something else comes along that maybe doesn't give the benefit of truck control traffic as they're proposing. We have to leave to the town, if they choose to approve the project, that they do it upon appropriate conditions, and the town will take appropriate action to enforce those conditions. But, I think there's significant, from my perspective, economic benefit in the nature of the tax revenue, employment, the traffic signals, which are an issue out there now, those should get in there. And then what they said in the nature of the water looping and the improvements to the trail. So those are my thoughts. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll just reiterate sort of a position that I took in the July time frame, and that kind of relates just again to, what is it that we are even authorized to do and what's even being asked of us right here. And, if it's as straightforward as, establishing an opinion, for public consumption, then, we're capable of doing that. And Peter, I think you just did that now. We're not empowered to really do anything by way of facilitating the project or, cutting back the project. We can really just kind of assess the current and downstream benefit of economic impact or detriment to other businesses in the area, because we are expected to be advocates of the business community of Holliston. That's why we were established and that's why we exist. And, philosophically, there's things we could contemplate about this project. Again, if this entity doesn't fill that space, who does, and what do they look like? If that entity goes to another town, a surrounding town, Milford, Hopkinton, Ashland, Medway, towns that, are seemingly growing, do those towns start growing at our expense? Does their traffic continue to cut through our town without us, seeing any sort of benefit and us getting the detriment of that activity? Would there even be future suitors for any commercial park at any of our industrial parks if we are perceived as unwelcoming or shutting our doors to commercial residents? So philosophically, again, that's one position you can take. And then if we were looking at the net benefit of the tax revenue to the town, right, estimated $1 million a year, right? What does that correlate to in terms of home values? And I was just Googling very quickly, right? But if the median home value in Holliston is $500,000 and there's 5,000 homes, and they're assessed as they at the current rate, the equivalent of $100 million. The equivalent of $1 million in tax revenue is something like 100 homes, or 2% build off of what is already existing for a residential base here. You assume 100 new homes, potentially 200 new children. 200 students entering Placentino is like 25% of their current enrollment. So you start thinking about, what is the impact to the town of achieving the equivalent of $1 million in tax base through residential means versus commercial means? And again, these are the questions that I think we ponder as part of this committee, but at the end of the day, we're not empowered to really act upon it. So I don't know that we can move to do anything other than express these opinions. So there's nothing that I can move.
I have the same question. Like, what I guess, Michael, like, what was your purpose of coming here? What are you looking for from us?
Sure. So in many towns, again, I do have a background in economic development, and Matt is correct. You're really not empowered to have any authority to direct what happens in town. You're more in an advisory, opinion, and investigative group that if the goal is to promote economic development in town, you're supposed to be looking at it through that lens, where the planning board has its lenses to look through and the Board of Health has its lens. Your lens is for the financial welfare of the community and the economic component of the community. So, you know, although you can't dictate what's going to happen, you can, you know, give your opinion in a vote, you know, that kind of describes what you believe is the benefits or the detriment for a project like this. Obviously, people brought up traffic issues, people brought other things that other boards are responsible for. But yours is again, it's focused on economic development. Now, how you internally do that, that's up to you. I'm just giving you my global view because you asked.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we would do, should we choose to do anything, is to send a letter to the planning board saying that we believe this project has a beneficial economic impact or a detrimental impact. Either one, if we choose to do either.
All right, and this is Glenn Brown, 23 Summit Point Drive. I would also add too, the benefit of the committee here is also to focus on the economic and have the people, the public, participate in that conversation. Because conversations, it seems, when it comes to like the planning board and other committees in the town, it is very focused on traffic. It is very focused on other aspects that aren't necessarily looking at the benefits of commercial development. And so that's what the purpose of this serves. I know that, you know, it seems like whenever this topic comes up on our agenda, we get a huge crowd. And when it's not on the agenda, we get maybe one person of the public to participate. So I think this is the benefit that we serve. And maybe we change people's minds. Maybe some people voice things that others can think about and communicate to others in the community for this project or against this project. So I think that's really what the purpose that we serve here today with this.
All right, what's the pleasure of the board? Do we want to send the planning board a letter one way or the other? I'm not hearing anything. Do I take that to no?
It's not a no. I don't want to express an opinion. You know, we have a charge. We're adults. We're tasked with a certain responsibility, and you know, I don't know that that's necessarily responsibility to express, you know, an outward opinion or direction to another committee. But you know, we could express in the form of a letter our understanding as to what the economic benefit of this project is, and our feelings in relation to that economic benefit to the town itself as it relates to our charter, right? You know, we don't, without necessarily going into directives, we can make an effort to appreciate the information that's been submitted to us, the discussion that's been had, and arrive at a simple determination as to whether or not there is an economic benefit, and then let them act upon that without saying necessarily, yes, you should proceed with this, or no, you shouldn't. Instead, do we perceive there to be an economic benefit? If so, what is that benefit? And express an opinion in that way. That's my suggestion.
And Matt, I would add too, and how it relates relative to the town, meaning, you know, put it in terms of scope. So for example, if, you know, property revenues from all residents is, you know, 48.5 million as an example, and this one project is 1 million, kind of putting things in terms of scope, in terms of what that looks like for people to quickly see it on one page, if that makes sense.
I mean, you know, I think one of the purposes we were set for is kind of look at this and tell people what we think it happens in basically the economic development of town. So I think it's appropriate for us to send them something. I mean, I've got information from the viewpoint of the commercial and residential valuation of the town. And I can report that, you know, what $1 million increase in that commercial taxation return would do and potentially mean if it was done in a residential basis, and the detrimental impacts of that would have from the viewpoint of kids in the school system and that type of thing. So there's, you know, benefit from that perspective, and I can put that together and send it to them. But I think we should, if we're in agreement, hit on the fact of the economic benefit of the traffic signals, the condition that the truck routing be as they suggest and tightly controlled by the planning board, that the economic benefit from the viewpoint of proposals to improve the trail and the water looping are all of economic benefit, and those are the items that should go in a letter if we're willing to send one. So does somebody want to agree to that and make a motion that that's the letter we send to the planning board, or what do we want to do?
Yeah, go ahead, Glenn.
No, Matt, I'll let you go because I was just going to make a motion. Go ahead.
Funny. No, sorry, I was gonna do the same. I make a motion to prepare a letter, you know, for us to review, with the intent of submitting to, did you say the planning board?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so without necessarily making a motion as to what the content or what the end conclusion of that letter is, right now, make a motion to prepare the letter for delivery to the planning board based upon everything that we've just discussed now in this recorded conversation.
I can prepare the letter, and that's fine. The issue is that we can't vote on the letter because we're not scheduled to meet before they meet with the planning board. So if we can do the letter, but if we're going to send the letter, we need another meeting before January 7th to vote on a letter. So
Right.
do we want to move our meeting from the 13th to the 6th? And I'll prepare a letter for that meeting.
I'm not opposed to that, yeah.
Do we have enough people to make that meeting, Dave? Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do that, and we will prepare a letter. And again, as our mission is economics, focusing on that, leaving to the board the final decision as to whether they choose to approve it, how they condition it upon truck routing hours, whatever else is the appropriate concerns that the public raises with them. This letter is solely focusing on economics. All right. All right. So that's what we'll do. The rest of the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do have a question just came up from Tina.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. Just a real quick question. The letter that you're proposing to write, members of the EDC, will it include also, so I think Glenn brought it up a little bit and certainly the resident comments brought it up.
We'll be fully discussing it at our next meeting so that the meeting will be open to the public.
Fair enough. My question though, is the intention to explore not only economic benefits, but the costs that have been raised as resident concerns. Is that something, I just didn't hear the discussion on it. I was wondering if you will look at both the pros and cons in the letter.
Any aspect that the committee determines is either an economic benefit comment or an economic detriment comment, I would assume would be in the final letter.
Right, Tina, this is Glenn Brown again. I would also say too, you know, in terms of the costs that were talked about, but also opportunity cost as well, meaning how many years have gone by this site hasn't contributed to the town in terms of tax revenue, that something has not been there. And, you know, if this does not go through, then what does that look like then? How many more years is this going on?
Thank you. That's great. Thanks.
Okay. Staffing, nothing left on that. Brownfield designation. Travis did tell me that the Board of Selectmen accepted the recommendation to create that status, and that's been sent to the state. I don't have anything else, any industrial park stuff, any downtown stuff. Downtown, I did get a note from Travis, that the the select board has authorized an application for local rapid recovery planning, which is COVID planning for the businesses in downtown. So they're filing for that grant. I can ask him if whether that, will help if we meet on January 6th, or whether there's a letter of support for us. And if that makes sense, we'll include that item and presumably send a letter in support of that grant application. Or unless we want to, are agreeable to send a letter to that effect now. I don't see the harm of saying we support the grant application for businesses released downtown from COVID.
I think we should send the letter.
All right, somebody want to make that motion?
Make the motion.
Lisa, second.
Second.
Glenn, any other discussion? All in favor? Roll call. Myself, aye. Glenn?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Lisa, Christine?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
All right. Travis also reports the Economic Development Fund legislation was released from committee. It could be on the House floor as early as next week, hopefully with approval. Governor would have to sign off on it, so presumably, hopefully by the end of January, we would have that legislation in place. The website, Chris did report that the website is capable of doing a business inventory where businesses could have their identification listed and a link with them. I can have Chris send around that. If you look at the, I guess, town of Littleton page has that. I understand that it's no cost to us, so I don't see any reason why we wouldn't do that to try to support our business to have them having links. So is the committee in favor of that idea?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll get definitive, whatever we need from Chris, we'll keep that and we can vote to implement that at the next meeting. I sent around the minutes from the last meeting. Anybody have any questions, comments on that? People ready to vote? No comments. Somebody want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from November or whatever it was, 10th?
Motion.
Matt, second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Glenn?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Myself, aye. I did not get anything from anybody in the nature of other zoning or planning applications, so I'm assuming there aren't any. And last item is anybody have any new business?
The only thing I wanted to bring up, this Christine Carosella, the only thing I wanted to bring up was, how do we go about, I think we talked about this a little bit, but tonight, I think like made me think of it further is, how do we have a meeting or something with the town? Because if this isn't the type of project that that people want in town to increase tax revenue, then what do people want? Like, so I'd be interested in hearing from people from the town about what type of business they expect to be in Holliston if this is not the type of business, because we only hear when it's a no, and I'd be interested in hearing when it's a yes.
That's a good point. I don't know whether it's every 5 or every 10 years. I don't know, but within some period of time, the planning board is supposed to conduct a master plan and study of the town and hold public hearings. I don't know when the last time that was done, so that you can have input on all this type of stuff. I can check to see when that was last done and when it's up again. As far as I know, that's the only technical process to do it, unless the Board of Selectmen, establishes a public meeting for general purposes. I don't think it's anything per se we can do, and it's not really our perspective. I would assume it's either the planning board or the Board of Selectmen. But let me check on see when the last one was done and see if there's anything coming up, and I'll report that for the next meeting. All right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be, I would consider it within our purview to, put an item on the agenda where it's a call for town discussion on types of businesses we'd like to attract and how this committee could help in doing that. Because, if this isn't the type of business people want to see in town, then I would love to hear what it is, because we have an industrial park, right? Like, we need to fill, we have industrial parks, they need to be filled. What kind of industry do we want in these industrial parks then?
Yep.
I'm all ears, right? Like,
I mean, we certainly could do it. The nature of, in Christine, you and Matt are far better off than I am on this, but we could certainly do a survey type thing that we could put out there, try to get some feedback on, you know? So I'll find out on past or future studies, and then we can have a more of a, you know, defined discussion on it. All right.
great. Michael?
Mike, yeah, did you have a question?
I think that's a great question. And the other thing I'd add to the master plan is the town, through its zoning efforts that are done by town meetings with 2/3 vote, in essence, that establishes the policy that the town would like to see developed. And in those zoning regulations, you delineate what uses are there. And so, you know, at some point, the town made those decisions back there. So I would just add to Peter that it's not only the master plan, which you have, it's also the zoning regulations. And, you know, that's where you give people rights, whether to build residential houses or to build industrial development. That's really the tool that you have to dictate what that end use is.
Yep. All right. Unless there's anything else, I think we're done. And I will accept the motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second, anybody?
I second.
All right, everybody all at once? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.